Okay, so let's pick up with where we left off, which is 494. They challenge Gandalf. I'm going to back up just a little bit. They ask him for his name, and he says, "My name, have you not guessed it already? You've heard it before, I think. Yes, you've heard it before, but come now, what of your tale?" And he says, "I know what your tale is about. Some would begin to doubt whether your errand is fit to tell. You know, following two young hobbits, blah, 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 blah." Turns his back. They see the light shining underneath their gray cloak. Gimli cries, "Saruman." Gandalf jumps up, throws his gray cloak away, and there he stood, his white garment shone. He lifted up his staff. Gimli's axe leaped from his grasp, fell ringing on the ground. The sword of Aragorn, stiff in his motionless hand, blazed with a sudden fire. I don't know if that means it literally blazed, because it sounds like it means it literally blazed. Legolas gave a great shout, shot an arrow high into the air. "Mithrandir, Mithrandir," he cries, etc. And Aragorn says, "Gandalf, beyond all hope, you return to us in our need. What veil was over my sight?" Okay? Beyond all hope. In other words, you catastrophe. And so Gandalf says, "Yeah, that was my name." Huh. Hadn't thought about that in a long time. So they go on and talk, and he says, "Yes, I am white. I'm white like Saruman should have been. I have passed through fire and deep water since we parted. I have forgotten much that I thought I knew and learned much again that I had forgotten." And so they begin to talk. And I'm going to skip a bunch. And Gandalf mentions that Merry and Pippin have begun an avalanche. Okay? And Aragorn's like, "What? You still talking riddles?" This is the middle of 496. And Gandalf says, "No, I wasn't talking riddles. I was just talking to myself, because it's usually a smart thing to do to talk to the one person who will understand you, which is myself." Okay? Aragorn doesn't take that very kindly, and so they kind of go back and forth. Let's skip to several pages. Go to 499. Gandalf explains that Merry and Pippin are with the Ents. "They are with Treebeard and the Ents," he says at the top of the page. Aragorn: "The Ents? Then there is truth in the old legends about the dwellers in the deep forests and the giant shepherds of the trees. Are there still Ents in the world? I thought they were only a memory of ancient days, if indeed they were ever more than a legend of Rohan." Now, what did Aragorn, just a few pages earlier, just finish talking to Éomer about? And Eothen. You know, that one could live in legends, that the old stories were true. Legolas: "A legend of Rohan? Nay, every elf in Wilderland has sung songs of the old Onodrim in their long sorrow. If I were to meet one still walking in the wood, then indeed I should feel young again." You get this impression that Legolas is young. But keep in mind, young is a very relative term when you're talking about elves. I never checked this. I don't know if the appendices tell us when Legolas is born. Knowing Tolkien, they probably do. It'd be interesting to find out how old he is, because, you know, he's probably 700 or 800 years old. And seeing an Ent when he's, you know, saying it would make him feel young again, that's something. So Gandalf goes on and says, "Treebeard is Fangorn." That is, Fangorn, the forest, is named after Treebeard. Why? He's the chief Ent. Doesn't mean he's the chief Ent now. It means he's always been the chief Ent, the eldest of the Ents. Okay? "The oldest living thing that still walks beneath the sun upon this middle earth." Well, stop for a moment. I thought somebody else was the eldest. The oldest living... Am I hearing a bird out there? The eldest living thing under the sun. Tom Bombadil. So when Tolkien writes this, is this an example of what he calls an error that he wasn't going to let anybody know about? Could be. What else could it be? What other explanation could it be? It can't be true that Tom Bombadil is the eldest and that Treebeard is the eldest. They cannot both be eldest. One has to be older than the other. There can be another explanation, however. It may be that Tom Bombadil is not a living thing that walks under the sun in this Middle Earth. In other words, Tom Bombadil may be alive in a different way than Treebeard is alive. Okay? So they go on, and Gimli says, but I thought Fangorn was dangerous. Gandalf, dangerous? So am I very dangerous. More dangerous than anything you will ever meet, unless you go before Sauron himself. And Aragorn is dangerous. They've already seen that, right? When Aragorn plays the little, Jedi mind trick kind of, and they see the star on his forehead and everything. You are dangerous, Gimli, with, your little midgety self and your double-headed axe. Okay? So they continue to talk, and Aragorn says, are we going to see our friends? He goes, no, we have to go another way first. And they have to go to Aedoras. And let's see, do I want to skip that? Yeah, we're going to skip that, since we're a little bit behind. They ask about the battle with the Balrog, 502. Gandalf talks about they fell, landed in the pool at the base of the mountain. And then he says they climbed up the stair, the endless stair, carved in the living rock of Zirig-Ziggle, the pinnacle of the Silvertine. And I'm going to read this long passage. There upon Celebdil was a lonely window in the snow, and before it lay a narrow space, a dizzy eyrie above the mists of the world. The sun shone fiercely there, but all below was wrapped in cloud. Out he sprang, and even as I came behind, he burst into new flame. There was none to see, or perhaps in after ages, songs would still be sung of the Battle of the Peak. But what would they say? Those that looked up from afar thought that the mountain was crowned with storm. Thunder they heard, and lightning, they said, smote upon Celebdil. Thunder they heard, and lightning they said. In other words, Gandalf has spoken with someone who witnessed the battle from a distance. Okay? A great smoke rose about us, vapor and steam, ice fell like rain. I threw down my enemy, and he fell from the high place and broke the mountainside, where he smote it in his ruin. Now, if I remember correctly, that is almost an exact copying of the language of Daniel, where Satan, Lucifer, is described in his fall from heaven and his landing on earth. All right? So Tolkien uses this biblical example there. And then Gandalf says this. Then darkness took me, and I strayed out of thought and time, and I wandered far on roads that I will not tell. Strayed out of thought and time. How do you stray out of thought and time? Especially the second part, time.
You're in a place where it doesn't exist.
Okay, well, if you're in a place that doesn't exist, then where are you?
You're dead.
You're dead. That's the only way you get out of time. Okay? So, he died and wandered far on roads that I will not tell. In other words, death isn't the end. There's still something after death. Okay? Naked I was sent back. Kind of a couple of important words there. One, naked. It doesn't only mean without clothes. I think, could be entirely wrong here, it also means without a body at first. Naked I was sent back for a brief time until my task is done. The other important thing, sent back. If he was sent, there had to be a sender. Who sent him back? Okay. Well, if he died, where did he go? Probably, conjecture here, I'm sure it shows up somewhere in the 12-volume history of Middle-earth, he probably went to what's called the Halls of Mandos, where elves go when they die. They go there, they get recharged. You know, think of it as a electric car powering station. Their batteries are dead. They go there, they stay there for a while, and then they get reincarnated back into Middle Earth. All right? That's probably where he was, and he was sent back. Why? Well, because he was originally sent to Middle Earth to counter Sauron. He's sent back because his task isn't done. In other words, yeah, he died, but that's not his, get out of jail card. He has to come back to finish what's his task, to be a counter to Sauron. Okay? It is not to take Sauron on in some great way. It's to, as he will tell Denethor later, to fulfill his job as steward. Okay? So he says, naked I was sent back, naked I lay upon the mountaintop. There, I think it is, physically naked, cold in the snow. The tower behind was crumbled into dust, and what happens? As always happens, whenever Gandalf gets in a really tight spot, Gwaihir the Wind Lord comes and rescues him. Not because he's just circling overhead and says, hey, there's Gandalf. What do we find out? When they told Galadriel, Gandalf fell, she's like, no, he didn't. Yeah, he did fall, but you can't keep him down. He'll be back, as it were. And so she sends Gwaihir to look for him. So on the next page, he tells them that Galadriel sends word. She sends a message to them. Okay? She tells Aragorn, look for the paths of the dead. Legolas, she says, beware the cry of the sea. Why? Because if he hears the sound of the ocean, just that undulation of the waves coming in and going out, what? He will never be happy in the forest again. He will want to cross the ocean and go home, as it were, to the land of the elves. And Gimli says, what about me? No word for me? Legolas, chill out, Gimli. Be happy, because her words aren't pleasing. He goes, yeah, but you at least got a word. I want something. Gandalf, huh? He forgot. Yeah, she did have words for you, Gimli. To Gimli, son of Glóin, give his lady's greeting. Lockbearer. Wherever thou goest, my thought goes with thee, but have a care to lay thine axe to the right tree. Wherever thou goest, my thought goes with you. Now, you can interpret that to mean what? She has Gimli on the brain. She's always thinking about Gimli. That's how Gimli interprets it. How do we know? In a happy hour you have returned to us, Gandalf, capering as he sang loudly in the strange dwarf tongue. What does that mean, capering? He's dancing an Irish jig. I mean, he's kicking his heels up and just pleased as punch. Okay? So, they make their way to Edoras. And as they make their way there, shoot, forgot to bring that. They go around some burial mounds. And, hold on just one second. I've got to find a text. Oh, that's good. And they go to these burial mounds, and Aragorn sings this little verse. Where now the horse and the rider? Where's the horn that was blowing? Where's the helm and the hauberk and the bright hair flowing? Where's the hand on the harp string and the red fire glowing? Where's the spring and the harvest and the tall corn growing? They have passed like rain on the mountain, like a wind in the meadow. The days have gone down in the west behind the hills, blah, 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 blah. All right? Go from there to this passage from an Old English poem titled The Wanderer. Okay? And the passage, as this passage in Tolkien also, is called a ubi sunt, which means where are. Okay? It's a technique that you see in a lot of Latin poetry, and Tolkien incorporates it here because we also see it in Anglo-Saxon or Old English poetry. And so it sounds like this. And you see this on the DVD version, or you see this in The Lord of the Rings, when Aragorn sings this song. What he's doing is he's singing Old English. Because Old English is the language, Tolkien tells us, essentially of the Rohirrim. So, where quam mag, where quam mago, where quam maduniva, where cum simbla yesetu, where sinden celadremus, eala berchtbuna, eala birnwiga, eala thadnus thrim. Those lines mean, where is the horse? Where the rider? Where the giver of treasure? Where are the seats at the feast? Where are the revels in the hall? Eala berchtbuna, alas for the bright cup. Eala birnwiga, alas for the mailed warrior. Eala thadnus thrim, alas for the splendor of the prince. Okay, so why does Aragorn sing this? What does he see when he's singing this song? It's a burial mound. And he's essentially saying, this is where we end up. Alas, because there's nothing left. There's nothing left of the horse and the rider. There's nothing left of the mailed shirt. There's nothing left of the bright cup, etc. Okay? They go past the mounds. They make their way to Edoras. And I'm going to skip a bunch. They go into the hall. Notice they're commanded to leave all of their weaponry behind. You know, and I can really understand Aragorn not wanting to leave Andúril. You know, it's been a broken sword for 3,000 years. It's just been remade. He doesn't want anybody playing around with it. You know, but he leaves the sword, so Gimli feels fine leaving his little axe next to it. But they want Gandalf to leave his staff, and he's like, fine. You guys want to be rude and impertinent to an old man? Fine. Make Denethor come out here and talk to me. Okay? So, Hama lets him go in. And he goes in, and Gandalf is challenged by Wormtongue, okay? He's chewing on his collar dingy. He's challenged by Wormtongue. And when he's challenged, this is what's called, in Old English at least, it's called a flit. This was kind of standard practice. Someone comes in to do something, and what do? You challenge them. It's a way of essentially saying, show me your credentials. Okay? So, Grima Wormtongue challenges Gandalf, and Gandalf replies. I'm not going to say everything that they said. And Gimli says some stuff, and Gandalf kind of pushes Gimli aside and essentially says, be quiet. And then Gandalf finally says, he shuts Wormtongue up on page 515 by saying, the wise speak only of what they know. Grima, son of Galmod, a witless worm have you become, therefore be silent and keep your forked tongue behind your teeth. I've not passed through fire and death to bandy crooked words with a serving man till the lightning falls. In other words, you're nobody. Shut up. Don't get involved. He raises his staff. There's thunder. The sunlight's blotted out from the eastern windows. The whole hall is dark as night. And Grima's like, blast it. I told Hama to make him leave his staff behind. As if Gandalf really needs his staff. Can Gandalf do, quote-unquote, magic without his staff? He has power of words. Okay. So now he addresses Theoden. And look at the description here and compare this with the film. and wipe the image of the film from forever from your memory and never watch it again. Okay? If I could only do that. Now, Theoden, son of Thingol, will you hearken to me? That is, it's not only will you hear me. Will you hearken to me means, will you hear me and follow my counsel? Do you ask for help? And he lifts his staff and he points to a window. And a little beam of light comes in. Remember, the hall is now pitch dark, except for this little beam of light. There the darkness seemed to clear, and through the opening could be seen, high and far, a patch of shining sky. Not all is dark. Remember how Tolkien describes joy when he's talking about the eucatastrophe? He says it is a piercing through of the other world. It is a glimmer of light beyond the confines of this world. That's a visual image here in the text of what he's talking about. Because where are they? They're in the midst of blackness. It is pitch black. And Gandalf points his staff, and you get a little glimmer of light. And what do they see in this glimmer of light? It's not just white light. They see blue sky. They see all is not dark. Yeah, it's dark where they are, but it's not dark out there. There is still blue sky. So, not all is dark. Take courage, Lord of the Mark, for better help you will not find. Take courage means find courage. Be a man. No counsel have I to give to those that despair. Because if they despair, what kind of counsel could he give? If you have no hope, what good will words do? None. So he's not going to waste his breath. Yet counsel I could give, and words I could speak to you. Will you hear them? They're not for all ears, meaning worm tongues. I bid you come out before your doors and look abroad. Too long have you sat in shadows and trusted to twisted tales and crooked promptings. Then does he point his staff at the king and go, and cast out the demon of Saruman? Do we see, the Lord of the Mark twist and turn, and sometimes we see his face, and sometimes we see Saruman's face? No, it's utterly asinine. What does Gandalf do? Will you listen? He doesn't do anything to the king. Why not? How does he get Frodo to take the ring in the first place? Does he make him? No. He doesn't make anybody. He offers counsel. That's it. He offers counsel. It is up to the individual to respond. Total free choice. Okay? Will you come outside? He asks. Theoden slowly gets up. Why? He's old. How old? He's not 90. He's probably, when I say old, he's probably younger than I am. He's probably in his late 40s. All right? A faint light grew in the hall again. Notice, we're not told that the faint light is because Gandalf takes his staff and goes and makes it light. What's the faint light come from? It comes from Theoden asserting himself. The hall begins to lighten as the king begins to return, as he begins to reclaim himself. The woman hastened to the king's side, taking his arm, and she helps the old man down from the dais, and he paces softly through the hall. Wormtongue remains lying on the floor. They go to the doors. Gandalf knocks, tells them to open. The doors roll back. Keen air comes rushing in. What does that mean, keen air? What is air when it's keen? Sharp, fresh, cold. This is like, opening your door on a morning when it's 10 degrees outside and you get smacked in the face with that coldness. What is it designed to do? It wakes him up. All right? Send your guards down the stairs. And he tells Eowyn, leave him alone with me for a while, lady. I'll care for him. He says, go. She turns, she goes down, she looks at Aragorn. The heart flutters. Aragorn doesn't really care because his heart's fluttering for Arwen wherever she is. Okay? She goes away. And what does Gandalf do? Look what? Upon your land. What did Eothane say to Eomer? Do we walk in the green grass under the light of day, or do we walk in fairy tales and shadows? Look on your land. The green grass under the sun. Remember that passage from the fairy story essay? Creative fantasy is founded upon the hard recognition that things are so in the world as it appears under the sun. Okay? Tolkien wants to drive that home. And what does he see? From the porch upon the top of the high terrace, they could see beyond the stream the green fields of Rohan, fading into distant gray. Curtains of wind-blown rain were slanting down. The sky above and to the west was still dark with thunder. Lightning far away flickered among the tops of hidden hills. But the wind had shifted to the north. All right? And already the storm that had come out of the east. Well, what's out of the east? Mordor. The storm that had come out of the east, what? Was receding. That is a visual eucatastrophe. It's not literary. It's not done by words. It's a visual representation. The storm won't last. This too shall pass. All right? Rolling away southward to the sea, and then suddenly, through a rent in the clouds, behind them, a shaft of sun stabbed down. So they're looking out. And what do they see? They see the land, and it's all covered with clouds. So they don't see shadows and everything. And suddenly, from their vantage point, behind them, there's a little break in the clouds, and a shaft of golden sunlight streams down. Like joy breaking through beyond the confines of the world. This is a visual representation of what happened in the hall. When they were in the hall became unnaturally pitch black. Why? Because Gandalf turned off the lights with his staff. And then he pointed, and they saw a little bit of light up in that window. That, however, was all artificial. Gandalf controlled that. Gandalf doesn't control this. This is the world breaking through and showing evil will not finally, ultimately win. Okay? The falling showers, what? Gleam like silver. Notice, it takes on new light. It looks different than it did before. And far away, the river glittered like a shimmering glass. And Theoden, it's not so dark here. Here, metaphorically, in the hall and in the world. What had he been led to believe by Grima Wormtongue? Life's a bitch and then you die. Life sucks. Life stinks. Life is rotten. Life is horrible. Okay? And now he sees, yeah, it's bad. It's not so bad. it's not totally bad. Gandalf, no, it's not. It's not as dark as you thought. Nor does age lie so heavily on your shoulders as some would have you think. What happens if you take a 3-month-old baby, take twins. You take one 3-month-old baby, you put it in a home where that baby is told from 3 months of age to 15 years old. You're a rotten, no good, dirty SOB who will amount to nothing and utterly worthless. I don't love you. Go eat worms. And the other child you take, and that child is raised in a loving, nurturing home, is given books to read, is sung to, is played with, is encouraged. How will the two be different at the age of 15? One will end up in prison, and the other won't. One will end up well-developed, well-adjusted, lots of friends, healthy, and the other will be mentally, morally, spiritually stunted. This one will be Gollum. Okay? This one will be, I don't know, Galadriel, let's say. Make the G's, so they alliterate. No, you're not as old as you think you are. He's been told for however many years. You're not a young man anymore, Theoden. Put the cares of the kingdom aside. Let me take them. I'll advise you. And he drops his staff. And what does he do? Slowly, as a man that is stiff from long bending over from some dull toil, he draws himself up. Because he's been walking around like this. And he drops his stick and he kind of goes, oh man, it hurts. And he rises up, and now how tall is he? He goes from being like 5'5" to 6'4". And he throws his shoulders up and his chest out, and he takes a deep breath, and he suddenly realizes, I'm 45. I'm not 85. I'm not going to put my teeth in the morning. He's not like that, but he was before. He acted like someone twice his age. All right? Dark have been my dreams of late, but I feel as one new awakened. He experiences one of the things from the fairy stories. Essay. What does he experience? Recovery. As one new awakened, he sees how he was meant to see. I would now, that word would means wished, desired. Now that you had come before Gandalf. Well, Gandalf did come before, right? And how was he taken? Gandalf, Stormcrow. Gandalf, bringer of ill news. Gandalf, bringer of ill fortune. Take a horse and leave. He just so happens to take the very best horse in the entire kingdom. The king's favorite horse, which of course the king can't ride because the horse won't let him. But Gandalf goes, come here, horsey. And Shadowfax, rolls over on its side, like a dog. Just, acts like Papa's come home. For I fear that already you've come too late, only to see the last days of my house. Right after he gets his full body erect, he stands up, he's regaining strength. It's kind of like, but I think you've come too late. And it's almost like he starts to deflate. What's to be done? It's not a question of despair, but it is a question that is filled with an element of despairing. He's saying, it's too late for me. Gandalf, much. In other words, don't go there. Don't give up on me yet, Theoden. Send for Éomer. You got him in prison, right? Yeah, I know how things work here. Bring him out. Well, you rebelled against my commands. A man may love you and yet not love Wormtongue or his counsel. In other words, a man may love you, may do what he thinks he is doing best for you, but not trust your trusted advisor. That's like saying a man can love President Obama, but think David Axelrod is the slimiest, sneakiest snake in the grass, if you know who David Axelrod is, okay? Or a man can love President Bush, but think Karl Rove is Satan incarnate. Totally different people, okay? Well, okay, yeah, I see your point. All right, I'll send for him. And so Eomer comes out. Gandalf says, you know, you'd feel better if you had a sword in your hand. Why? Well, what kind of king is Theoden? He's a warrior king. What does his name mean? Theoden. It's Old English. It means king. He's king. Okay? The Theod means the people. Okay? He's a warrior king. It's like saying, you know, you'd feel better to a warrior king today. You'd feel better if you put an M16 in your hand. Or you'd feel better if you put a Barrett M50 in your hand. That'll make you feel manly, you know. Instead, what does he have? You know, it's like he's got a little feather somewhere and he's, you know, waving it around. Put a sword in your hand. And what does Eomer do? Here, Lord, take mine. Who told him he could have a sword? After all, what has Theoden been told about Eomer? He wants you dead. He wants your kingdom. He's next in line. Why? Because Theoden's son is dead. He has no heirs other than Eomer and Eowyn. Okay? So what happens when he takes his sword? He swings it, he feels strong, and he cries out, Arise, now arise, riders of Theoden. A dire deeds awake, dark is it eastward, let horse be bridled. In other words, let's ride to glory. What he really means is let's ride to our deaths. This is how a good pagan, because they are pagans, this is how a good pagan warrior king ought to die. In battle. Not sitting on his little high throne with his little advisor, feeding him pap and drivel. All right? So, they have to bring Wormtongue in because, as with Gollum, as with Saruman, he has to be given a chance. What's the options given to him? Prove your love of me. Prove your counsel to me. Ride with me into battle. If you die with me, then I know you're one of us. And he's like, what's behind door number 2? Leave. Leave. Go wherever you want. Yeah, you can even go back to Saruman if you want. Now I'll take door number 2. Spits at Theoden and goes. All right? So then things start to move along at a pretty fast pace. Eomer and Gimli meet up again, and Gimli's like, you know, I'll forgive you for your stupid comments about the Lady Galadriel, and they make peace. And we get to chapter 7, Helm's Deep. Okay? The chapter is how long? I'll tell you how long. It's 16 pages. The battle portion of the chapter, of the Battle of Helm's Deep, is only 9 pages. Out of the entire novel, The Two Towers. 9 pages out of, it's like 250. And it is a third of the film. Now, who loves war? Tolkien or Peter Jackson? Okay. Or, put it another way, who takes one thing and says, ooh, look, CGI. I can have fun. You know, Peter Jackson. Tolkien doesn't care about any of that. So, they ride to the Battle of Helm's Deep. And I'm going to skip a bunch. In fact, I'm going to skip almost all of it. I am going to skip all of it. Yeah, we're going to skip all of it. Go to chapter 8, the road to Isengard. What do? You get people whacking other people, Legolas and Gimli having their little duel. Who can kill more orcs? Gimli with his little axe or Legolas with his magical bow. It's not really fair, even though Gimli does end up winning. They make their way to Isengard, bottom of 549. Notice, however, at the end of the Battle of Helm's Deep, why do Aragorn and Theoden and Éomer, etc., ride out from the cave? What do they think is happening? They're losing. So why do they ride out? To die. How? In battle, not caged and cooped up. They're going to go out, if you're familiar with the film, they're going to go out like Butch and Sundance. Man, they're going to go out in a blaze of glory. They're going to, as Harry Potter will tell Dumbledore later on, he's going to take as many of them out as he can. All right? And they ride out to battle, and what happens? Gandalf steals all the thunder. I mean, there's it's the Lone Ranger off in the distance, the white horse, the sunlight comes through behind him, and Bran comes in and saves the day. Okay? So they make their way to Isengard. And what do they see? Ents and Hjorns. Moving trees, moving forests. And Legolas is like, totally cool. I want to go in. You don't want to go in trees. No, Legolas, because what happens to people who go into the Hjorns? They become unpeople. They go away. All right? So they make their way to Isengard. And they get to what had been the gates of Isengard, and what do they see? Page 556. Isengard's been destroyed. The tower is still there, but the wall around has been destroyed. And there they see, lying on slabs of concrete, essentially, are these two funny little figures, smoking. There are bottles and bowls and platters laid beside them. Notice, bottles, probably not one for each of them. If you know anything about Merry and Pippin, little drunks. Bottles, bowls, platters, like they just eaten well and now they rested from their labor. One seemed to sleep, the other crossed legs, arm behind his head, leaned back, and there's smoke coming from his mouth. And Theoden and Éomer are amazed. And then we see the little people speak. We are the door wardens. Meriadoc, son of Saradoc, is my name. My companion, he kicks him. Here is Peregrine, son of Paladin of the house of Took. The Lord Saruman is within. And Gandalf and Aragorn and and Legolas and Gimli look at them. And Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli are like, why, you little... Because here they are. They ran for how many miles? Hundreds! Chasing them. And everything's fine and dandy with them. Okay? So, we get to chapter Flotsam and Jetsam, where they hear, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, about what happened to the hobbits. Okay? And they pass around the pipeweed. Always have to throw in that pipe first, because, people kind of go, whoa, way to go. Merry and Pippin, smoking weed, man. Which is from the Shire. Okay, what should that tell them? They don't even put two and two together. What's Saruman doing with pipeweed from the Shire? Something's not right in Denmark or in the Shire. So they tell him all about what had happened with Treebeard and how the Ents took care of Isengard. And we get to chapter 10, the voice of Saruman. Okay. Gandalf says, I need to have a talk with Saruman. Some of you need to be with me. Theoden, you need to be there. Why? Because you're the one that Saruman has wronged the most. Okay? And he says, Aragorn needs to be there because, all of this concerns him. Gimli says, Legolas and I want to come to, represent our kindred. Gandalf says, well, okay. Pippin wants to come. Merry wants to come. Okay. So Gandalf goes up to the tower, and the tower looks like this. It's not, here's the Tower of Orthanc. Gandalf doesn't just stand down here and go, Saruman! No, he goes up the staircase. There's a staircase, and then right here, like cut into the wall, here's the tower. Cut into the wall, there's a landing with a door and a little, balustrade and rail. And it's there that Gandalf says, Saruman, come forth. Who else uses language like that? Lazarus, come forth. It's a command, all right? So, what do we see? Who is it? What do you wish? Theoden starts. I know that voice. It's Grima Wormtongue. Gandalf's like, go away. Bring Saruman. And another voice speaks, low and melodious, its very sound and enchantment. Those who listened unwarily to that voice could seldom report the words that they heard, and if they did, they wondered, for little power remained in them. Mostly they remembered only that it was a delight to hear the voice speaking. All that it said seemed wise and reasonable, and desire awoke in them by swift agreement to seem wise themselves. When others spoke, they seemed harsh and uncouth by contrast, and if they gainsaid the voice, anger was kindled in the hearts of those under the spell. For some, the spell lasted only while the voice spoke to them, and when it spoke to another, they smiled, as men do who see through a juggler's trick while others gape at it. For many, the sound of the voice alone was enough to hold them enthralled. But for those whom it conquered, the spell endured when they were far away. They heard that soft voice whispering and urging them. But none were unmoved. None rejected its pleas and its commands, an effort of mind and will. So who does the none include? Gandalf. When he hears Saruman's voice, he has to consciously tell himself, don't listen to him, don't believe him. What about the others, like the riders who are down at the base of the tower? They hear Saruman and they bite hook, line, and sinker. They're completely taken in. Okay? And so we hear Saruman, well, why must you disturb my rest? Will you give me no peace at all by night or day? And they look up and they see a kind-looking old man, like Grandpa. His hair and beard were white. Strands of black still showed about his lips and ears. Gimli, like and you unlike. Like Gandalf, but not quite the same. But come now, two at least of you I know by name. Gandalf I know too well to have much hope that he seeks help or counsel here. But you, Theoden, Lord of the Mark of Rohan, are declared by your noble devices, meaning the marks on his livery, the coat of arms, and still more by the fair countenance of the house of Eorl. Talk about sucking up. He says, oh, you guys are so beautiful. I mean, you're just like, the Hemsworth family. You're just disgusting. O worthy son of Thengel, the thrice renowned, why have you not come before, and as a friend? Blah, 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 blah. So what does he do? He addresses Theoden directly. Theoden opens his mouth to speak, and he doesn't. But somebody does. There's a long period when nobody speaks. Gimli does. The words of this wizard stand on their heads. In the language of Orthanc, help means ruin, and saving means slaying. That is plain. We do not come here to beg. Notice Gimli doesn't go, oh, Mr. Saruman, my name's Gimli, son of Gloin. I'm from... He doesn't say any of that. Peace! I do not speak to you yet, Gimli Glowins. 2 of you I know by name. Gandalf, Theoden, Gimli, son of Gloin. Well, that's 3, unless math is a little different in Isengard. Far away is your home, and small concern of yours are the troubles of this land. I know you've been valiant, you're a good warrior, blah, blah, shut. What now have you to say, Theoden King? Will you have peace with me and all the aid that my knowledge founded in long years can bring? Now keep in mind what that means. Will you have peace with me? And will you learn from me all that I know, that I have learned over my long years? How long are his years? Oh, well over 3,000. Still, Theoden doesn't answer. Maybe he's considering. Éomer speaks. Lord, hear me. Now we feel the peril that we were warned of. What was the peril? Gandalf said, beware his voice. And Gimli says, well, I want to see if he looks like you. And how would you know that, Gimli? Because if he wanted to look like me, in your eyes, he would look like me. Who do you think you are, Gimli, to judge us? We're wizards. We're not like you. We can appear how we want to appear. All right? So, Éomer goes on. Have we ridden forth to victory only to stand at last, amazed by an old liar with honey on his forked tongue? So would the trapped wolf speak to the hounds if he could. What aid can he give to you, forsooth? All he desires is to escape from his plight. But will you parley with this dealer in treachery and murder? And then he delivers the coup de grace. Remember Theodred at the fords and the grave of Hama in Helm's Deep. When he talks about Saruman being like a trapped wolf to the hounds, there's a perfect historical analog, okay, from the Iraq War. Right after the Second Iraq War began in spring of 2003, and we literally started bombing the hell out of Iraq. Anybody remember what Saddam Hussein did? Let's talk. Let's have a peace conference. Why? Because he knew he wasn't going to win this one. So it's the sound of the coward who's getting the snot beat out of him saying, can we have peace now? And the victor's going to go, oh yeah, because I'm really afraid you're going to hurt me. Okay? Éomer finishes by saying, remember Theodred at the fords. Well, who's Theodred? Theoden's son. What happened to Theodred at the fords? He was killed. But he wasn't only killed. Because what did they do after he was killed? They hacked his body into little pieces. They went against all the notions of what is right and proper in war. You don't mutilate the dead. There is something sacred about the body, even in Tolkien's Middle-earth. All right? If we speak of poisoned tongues, what shall we say? Serpent? Notice what happened to Saruman at that point. What did he do? He lied a little bit. He forgot who he was, and he didn't put on the charm. Because then we're told, and the flash of his anger was now plain to see, but come, Éomer, Éoman's son. Well, there's 4. To every man his part. Valor in arms is yours, and you win high honor thereby. Slay whom your Lord names as enemies, and be content. In other words, you are a gun. Guns don't get to think about policy and diplomacy. Guns merely fire when the trigger is pulled. So, shut up and stay out of my business. Okay? Third time. But, my lord of Rohan, Am I to be called a murderer because valiant men have fallen in battle? Is that what Aylmer said? He's a murderer because men died in battle? Do soldiers fighting in war commit murder when they kill an enemy combatant? No, that is not murder. What is murder? It's when you're killing somebody who isn't prepared. It's when you're killing somebody who isn't at war. If it's first degree, you plan everything out so that you get them when they are unawares. Who's an enemy combatant, guess what? They are aware when? 24/7, 365. If there is involved, then no matter where they are, when they are, what they are, it's war. It's not murder. What is Saruman doing? He's using what's called moral equivalence. And he's trying to equalize dying in battle with murder. Okay? Because this is how he can get himself off of this charge of murder. What is Eomer talking about when he mentions Theodred at the fords? This wasn't war. What Saruman's forces did was they attacked a defenseless hamlet, a defenseless town. And Theodred marched to the defense and was killed. But Theodred wasn't the only one. Women and children were killed. Okay? That's murder. That's murder. But Saruman wants to say, oh, we were all involved. If you go to war needlessly, I didn't desire it, then men will be slain. If I am a murderer on that account, then all the house of Eorl is stained with murder. Because you went to war, you're all guilty of murder. So he says, shall we have peace? It's ours to end. You and I, come on, right now, let's sit down. Let's have the peace pact of Isengard. And finally, Theoden speaks. We will have peace. And several of the writers cry out, we're told, gladly. What does that mean, they cry out gladly? How do they cry out? Do they just go, What does that mean, gladly?
Like they're cheering.
What do they say? Yes, yes! Why? We can go home. We can go back to our families. We won't die in a land far away. Peace. Who doesn't want peace? Peace, however, is not merely the absence of conflict. Are we at peace with North Korea? If we were, we wouldn't have 50,000 American troops stationed. Why? Why are our 50,000 troops in North Korea? What purpose do they serve? They are one thing. They are a tripwire. That's the only reason they serve. If North Korea were to ever attack South Korea, you know what would happen to those 50,000 Americans? They'd be dead. Instantly. Because North Korea would launch rockets. They are there for solely one reason. Trip on us. Trip that wire, and what's the resulting boom? Then you get the whole United States involved. Then you get the rest of the United States military. Probably meaning then you get a small-scale, little local theater nuclear response. You turn North Korea into a parking lot, in other words. Okay? Yes, we will have peace. When you and all your works have perished. See, here's something Theoden understands. That our good friends, that's ironic, in the United Nations don't understand. Peace seldom comes as a result of a pen and paper. How did peace come at the end of World War II? What did Japan have to acknowledge?
Defeat.
What kind of defeat? Total, universal, complete. It wasn't, you get to keep whatever you have now and we'll take what we have and everybody will be happy. That's what happened at the end of Korea. Okay? What are we in with Korea? An armistice. Okay? We are still technically at war. We have a ceasefire with Korea that has been ongoing for over 60 years with North Korea. That's been ongoing for over 60 years. World War II ended because the Germans and the Italians and the Japanese capitulated. They said, "Uncle, we give." Total surrender. How did the North defeat the South? Total surrender. Lee at Appomattox, yes, he did sign a piece of paper. What did the piece of paper say? We lose, you win. Okay? That was it. Notice what Theoden is saying. We will not have peace that is a quote-unquote negotiated settlement. We had a negotiated settlement in what war with Iraq? Desert Storm. The first Gulf War. How did that end? Was it Iraq totally surrendering? No. George Bush Sr.'s big mistake. It was, no, they get to keep everything they got that they took from Kuwait. Okay? But they don't get to keep Kuwait. Everything else was fine. Yeah, we had some, things where we're going to have these no-fly zones and stuff, but what did we not stipulate about the no-fly zone? You can't fly jets in the no-fly zones. Shoot, we forgot to mention helicopters and helicopter gunships, which are just as deadly as jets, okay? So what happened? Well, 12 years later, it had to be finished. Because how did that first Gulf War end? It was a ceasefire. So for 12 years, a ceasefire was going on. And yet for 12 years, what continually was happening? As Allied jets were flying over the North and South no-fly zones, what were the Iraqis doing? Locking on with radar, sometimes actually shooting anti-aircraft, in which case, we'd have a few bombing runs, etc., just to, slap them upside the head and say, "Stop that." That's what happens. No. We will have peace when you and all your works have perished, and the works of your dark master to whom you would deliver us. That's a bigger problem. That's like George Bush II, W., saying in his speech to Congress on September 20th, 2011, terror will end when terror ends. Think about that for a moment. When does terror end? From my perspective, it ends when all of you and everybody else in the world is dead. And I'm the only one left alive. Why? Because any one of you can be a terrorist. Any one of you saying something I don't like, I could take that as terrorism. Dr. Sherman, you should have dressed terrorist, And the same applies for each one of you. The only way terror would be eradicated would be if only one left alive. So we'll never eradicate terror, God willing. Entails. So, even if your war on me was just, as it was not, even so, what will you say of in the Westfold and the children that lie dead there? See, just war theory goes back to St. Augustine. One of the tenets of just war theory, you cannot attack civilian populations. Period. Well, the United States and the Allies violated that in the Second World War. Before Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Because we bombed a civilian population. Little town, it's irony by the way, it wasn't a little town, it's a big town, called Dresden, Germany. We did it for reason alone, to break the will of Germans. We slaughtered tens of thousands who were non-combatants. We justified it, meaning the Allies justified it, because we said everybody is a combatant. On what basis? They worked for the war effort. They worked in the factories that built ball bearings, in the planes, that were used in the jets, that were used in the tanks, that were used in the armored personnel carriers. And because they did that, they were a legitimate target. Sophistry, reasoning through the wazoo. Okay. Hiroshima and Nagasaki, same. There were military factories. But were they military targets like Tokyo? Tokyo's where the emperor was. You want a military target? Kill the head. That's a military target. Why didn't we go for Tokyo? Because we knew if we bombed Tokyo, then we'd really piss them off. Then there'd be no surrender. Hiroshima and Nagasaki, once they saw what the damage was, we give. Because they realized, you have one of those, you have two of those, how many more will there be? Okay? Saying it was wrong. Personally, I think it was right. Because of how many more people would have died if they hadn't dropped them. And I don't mean only American soldiers, I mean Japanese soldiers and civilians as well. The number of dead would have been 10 to 20 times more. 150 to 300,000 in the actual bomb blast at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, to 2 or 3 million if we'd had to invade Japan itself. So, the riders gaze up, they look at that and they're like, what the hell is he doing? Why? And then Saruman just lets loose. He's, had enough. So he calls Theoden what he really thinks of him. Dotard, what is the house of Errol but a thatched barn where brigands drink in the reek and their brats roll the dogs? Well, that's pretty true, actually. I mean, if you've ever seen images, drawings, etc., of what an Anglo-Saxon meat hall would be like, yeah, they would have the dogs inside. Probably some of them also had the cows and pigs inside. Okay? So he goes on and he goes, but there's one more. But you, Gandalf, buddy, friend, compadre, we're not like this here folk. Won't you come up? Can't we talk this over? And everybody thinks, that's it. We're done for. He'll go up. We'll be given up. We're screwed. Gandalf, huh? What? What do you want to talk about? Saruman says some stuff. And Gandalf laughs. Saruman, you missed your path in life. You should have been a Jedi. I am beyond your comprehension. You know what? Saruman's got to go, huh? What do you mean you're beyond my comprehension? How is it Saruman knows who Eomer is, and he knows who Gimli is, but he doesn't now know that Gandalf is Gandalf the White? Shouldn't he have sensed a disturbance in the Force, so to speak, that tells him that there's a new guy on the block, as it were? Okay. He says, no, I'm not coming up. You were jailer of Mordor, but will you come down? In other words, will you put yourself under my authority? Will I come down? Yeah, right. So that you can have, the staffs of the fire, he says. And Gandalf says to him, bottom of 582, I do not wish to kill you or hurt you, as you would know if you really understood me. I have the power to protect you. I am giving you a last chance. You can leave or think, free if you choose. Free how? With my staff, or will you take my staff? Gandalf said, no, you have to leave your staff with me, and you have to leave the keys at Orthanc. And they will be returned to you. If what? If you behave. If you show yourself worthy. Okay? And, yeah, right. Leaves. Gandalf's, I did not leave you go, give you leave to go. Bottom of 583. I have not fool, Saruman, and yet pitiable. And because he's pitiable, what is he also worthy of? Mercy. Mercy. You might still have turned away from folly and evil, been of service, but no, instead, what do? You choose to gnaw your old plots. You want to try to figure out a way to get back for her. So he says, no, not anymore. Why? Because I'm not Gandalf the Grey, whom you tricked. I am Gandalf, who has returned from death. Now, Theoden and the writers probably go, what? What? He died and came back? You have no color now, and I cast you from the order and from the council. Cast you means you are no longer a wizard. This is telling us how much power Gandalf now has. Council just means he doesn't get to hang around with Galadriel and Gandalf and Elrond anymore when they have their little meetings of the White Council. Okay? So he's part of the Council of the Wise, but more importantly, he's no longer an Istari. Okay? Doesn't mean he's no longer a Maya. He raises his hand. Saruman, your staff is broken. Notice, he doesn't raise his staff. He doesn't go. He just raises his hand. Like what? Where did we see someone raise a hand earlier and something happened? Black Rider, the captain of the Nine, raised his hand, and what happened to Frodo's puny little sword? Shattered. What happened to his tongue? Stuck to the roof valve. He couldn't speak anymore. Showing the power of the Lord of the Nine. Well, Gandalf's going to, oh yeah, well, I'll up you one. He do. He raises his hand, and he says, your staff is broken, and Saruman's staff breaks. Okay, breaking his staff, that's, breaking all of his power. Go. And Saruman is flung backward. Like a hand, literally, has him by the coat neck and throws him. What is Saruman thinking at this point? No. Oh, now I've done it. Gandalf get this power? It's not from himself. He was sent back. Manwë. That is, when he went back to the halls of Mandos and got his battery charged, they probably did a refurb at that time. And they put in a new battery. He's kind of like Iron Man, He replaces the one thing with the newer, powerful arc reactor, as it were. Well, Gandalf has a newer, more powerful reactor inside. So the others are kind of like, wow. And then Wormtongue throws the thing away. Pippin picks up. And we get chapter 11, the Palantir, which I'm going to get through very quickly. What does Pippin do? He steals it. He's already been warned by Gandalf, fool of a Took. Okay. He steals it, and what does he do? He looks in it. His fingers are itchy. He looks in it, and what does he see? Sauron. And Sauron goes, oh, this is with my dainty. And Pippin lets out a shriek, and Gandalf comes. Gandalf tests him, and Gandalf says, you've not been hurt, given anything away. And he gives then the stone to Aragorn. Why? What is a Palantir? Seeing Stone of Numenor. What is Aragorn? Descended directly from Numenor. The Palantir belonged to, and then Isildur, and then his descendants. Okay? So he gives it to Aragorn, and then what do Gandalf and Pippin do? They leave. Why? Gandalf knows Pippin's going to want to try and get back to the Palantir. So they leave and they go off to Mordor, Minas Tirith. So Gandalf and Pippin go off one way. Merry, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli are now over here. Down here. You talk about the breaking of the Fellowship, it's just shattered at this point. And then what does Tolkien do? Book 4, Taming of Smeagol. We go all the way back to when Frodo and Sam left. So we're going to leave the king in the lurch and go on to Frodo and Sam. And what do? They capture Gollum. Okay? They see Gollum, they hear him. Page 613. Precious, my precious, more haste, less speed, I'll break my little neck. Precious. No. And what does Sam want to do? Slit his little throat. I mean, just kill him right then and there. Frodo sits us, and Sam's rubbing his shoulder, which has fang marks in it, because Gollum bit him. He hasn't he, you know. And Frodo's Gollum, and he thinks. 6:15. What a pity Bilbo did not stab that wild creature when he had a chance. Pity that stayed his hand. Pity and mercy not to strike. I don't feel any pity for Gollum. He deserves death. Deserves death? I dare say he does. Many that live deserve. Some die that deserve life. Can you give that to them? Be not too eager to deal out death in the name of justice. Notice the conversation he replays is not exactly the same as the conversation as it occurred. Why? How many of us remember conversations perfectly? This is Frodo's reconstruction of the conversation. It's pretty accurate. And so he looks at Gollum, and what does he see? Now that I see him, I do pity him. Well, what has happened in the intervening time? Frodo's put on the ring, and what happened as a result of putting on the ring? Got stabbed with a Morgul blade. He nearly faded. What has happened also since then? Well, he knows Gollum's been following. He saw Boromir change before his eyes. And he sees Gollum, and what is he starting to understand? He knows what little effect the ring has been having on him in the few years he's had it. How must it be gnawing away at Gollum, who had it for, don't remember how long, 600 years, before Bilbo stole it from him. And now it's back, okay? So, they tame Gollum, and how does Frodo tame him? Gollum will swear on the precious. No, you're not going to swear on the precious. You swear by, okay, I'll swear by the precious. And what does Frodo do? He makes Gollum swear the master of the precious and to never allow him, Sauron, to get it back. Now, this is where Frodo should have taken a college course in negotiating 101 because he's not a very good lawyer. Because if he'd taken a course in negotiating 101, what would he have learned to do? Define your terms. What is meant, for example, by master of the precious? I will serve the master of the precious, comma, a.k.a., also known as, Frodo Baggins, son of Drogo Baggins, heir of Bilbo Baggins, of Bag End, Bagshot Row, the Shire, Hobbiton, Middle Earth, the world, and I will never attempt to take from said Baggins until I die. Until after I die. Just make that part clear. Doesn't do any of that. So what does Gollum immediately start to think? Well, if I was master of the ring, then I could protect myself. I can't take it from him, but she will do it. And he starts to think about Shelob. Okay? So, Passage of the Marshes. One little line. We've only got a couple minutes left. Page 625. This is where I'd hope to be. Page 625. They are realizing that they're wholly in the hands of Gollum. Frodo asks, towards the bottom of the page, how do we shape our course now, Smeagol? That is, must we cross these evil-smelling fens? That is marshland. Notice the language Frodo uses there. How shall we shape our course? He is suggesting they have total control over their destiny. What he means, on a literal level, is how do we find our way through this bogland? Because if you've ever been in bogland, one wrong step off of firm ground puts you in soft ground, which is usually like quicksand. Okay, quicksand is real. And Gollum says, you know, we can go right through, etc. And they make their way through the dead marshes. And what does Frodo see and Sam see? They see faces in the water. Okay, why? Because Tolkien experienced the same thing in World War I. With numerous anecdotes of men trying to get from one trench to another trench as they're moving across the battlefield, taking territory. And they get out of a trench and they climb and crawl on their hands and knees, and they would come to a puddle and see a disembodied looking up at them. From a guy who had his head blown off because of cannon fire, or had his body out from under him because of cannon fire. All right? Well, what are these faces that they're seeing? These are the dead from what battle? The battle that Elrond was telling them about back at the Council of Elrond. These are the dead of and elves that occurred over 3,000 years ago. All right? And Sonic says, yeah, but you can't get to the faces. Well, I tried once. And Sam's thinking, you know, what do you mean you tried? Gollum eats, you know, pretty much whatever. Dead, rotting corpse, it's better than nothing. Or it's better than grass. Okay? So they make their way through. And we will stop there and pick up on 632.